Hey guys, Yama Killer here, back around with a deck roundup for the week, telling you what decks to play each weekend. And this weekend we've got special events, the MTGO Showcase events. Big events qualify you for a 24-man event, which if you win that event, then you qualify for the Magic Online Championship Series, another event, which is 8-man, 5K minimum cash. So really big events this weekend with lots of good prizes. And I'm going to tell you guys what I would play in each of these big events. Now, there's 6 of them, so we're going to start with the first one, which is Standard. Now, to be honest, I do not know much about Standard. I'm kind of guessing based off of what some people have told me that I've talked to and some articles that I've read a little bit of. I basically haven't played Standard for about a month and a half now, but I'm going to tell you guys what I would play personally and what decks I think are good. Now, personally, I'm going to play Mono Green Aggro. I've been told it's pretty good in the metagame. It is quick. I'm going to be triple queuing events, which means I'm going to be playing 3 events at once. If I have to play 3 matches at once, I can't really play a slow deck in any of the formats, so I'm going to be playing Mono Green. It's a good aggro deck. I'm mostly an aggro player, and I think I've been told that this deck is pretty well positioned. So this is the deck that I'm going to be choosing for Standard. What decks I would choose if I was not triple queuing and I actually had time to practice, from what I've been told. Temur Reclamation, very good deck still. Wilderness Reclamation and Expansion Explosion, still pretty busted. Uro, Shark Typhoon, all the goods, Pretty hard to go wrong with this deck. But if you're playing multiple matches at once, it's a little bit hard to play a slower style deck where you're playing a controlling role in some of the matchups. So I'm not sure I would play this deck if you're playing more than one match at once. Same with this other deck, which I've been told is one of the best decks of the format, Bant Ramp in some form or another. Fairy Time Raveler, Nesu Shakes the World, Elspeth Conquers Death, and some cards around it, Growth Spiral, Uro. All the just good blue, green, white cards, basically, and you ramp a little bit. You have new additions like Ugin. Basically, you're just trying to ramp. You're trying to make sure that you can just keep playing big spells each turn and interact with your opponent in a reasonable way. These cards kind of do that. So this is another deck I've been told is doing very, very well in the metagame, and another deck I would choose if I was playing one match at once. If I'm playing multiple matches, not a deck I would choose. It is slow and grindy at times, and it's not something you can play multiple matches with. So if you're planning on playing only one of these events on Saturday, which there's 3, Standard, Modern, and Vintage, I would choose between Temur Reclamation and Bant Ramp. If you're playing multiple matches, I would choose Mono Green as a great aggro deck and good in the metagame. Now, let's move on to Pioneer. Pioneer, going to be having some bans in the next week, but the decks that I think are going to get bannings, I would play those. Inverter of Truth, Inverter deck, just great blue-black combo control deck. Usually those archetypes are pretty busted, and this is one of them, tier 1, possibly even tier 0 by some people's metrics. I've been told by many of the people that play Inverter, it feels like a busted deck, anyone playing it. Not playing it is a fool. So I would play, this is one of the decks. I am not going to be playing this deck, and I'll tell you which deck I'm going to be playing in a moment. But this deck I would not play, mainly because some games go very long. You need to think about how to manage your graveyard with your dig through times, and your Jaces, and your Inverter. And I'm going to be playing 3 matches at once, as I said, so I can't play a complicated deck in any of the formats. So, this is the deck that I'm going to play. I'm going to be playing Mono Red Aggro. I've tuned it a little bit to play for an expected metagame of Dimir Inverter, Mono White Devotion, and Lotus Breach. You can see from the 4 Damping Spheres along with some Ash Zealots. You can see Fries for Inverter as well, Rampaging Ferocidons for white, along with Rending Volleys and the Fries, and Collective Defiance for Inverter along with Chandras. Basically, this deck is just trying to say, I want to be playing quickly, I want to not be thinking all that much, and I want to kill my opponents quickly so I can play multiple matches at once. Now you can see that my deck choices are very, very much defined by the fact that I'm going to be playing multiple queues, and you can tell that I'm not necessarily playing the tier 0/tier 1 deck, because I want to have multiple matches going on at once. Because the 5% equity I'm potentially going to get by playing a better deck and learning it in one format is not going to be matched by the equity that I'm getting by playing multiple formats and being able to potentially do well in one of them, whereas in one given tournament you can do not as well. Another deck that I think is going to have banned cards is Lotus Breach. I talked about this last week, and I'm going to talk about it again in this week. I think the 2 best decks, Dimir Inverter and Lotus Breach, need very specific cards to be interacting with them in a meaningful way, and they have good cards to interact with those cards, essentially. And the fact that people are also going to be prepared for other decks like Vampires, Mono White Devotion, Mono Red, Bant Spirits, Sultai mid-range, you basically get to just say, okay, you don't have the right cards for me, I'm going to win, and my deck is incredibly powerful, and this deck is narrow, and has good anti-hate cards. So basically, I want to play the cards that make your opponent forced to have the answers, and you also have good answers to their answers, and play like and can play some long games as well. So basically, I would be playing Dimir Inverter or Lotus Breach if you could be playing one match at once, or maybe only 2 matches, because the decks are somewhat complicated and take a long time to win with. If you were playing multiple queues, Mono Red Aggro I think is a very reasonable choice, as it's quick, easy, and has some reasonable sideboard cards and main deck cards against the metagame that I think is going to be happening. So, let's move on to the third format, Modern. Once again, another format that's going to be having some bans. I think this format, once again, has some Tier 0 decks. Sultai and Bant Control. Force Negation, incredibly good. Icing Quaddle, incredibly good. Arkham's Astrolabe, incredibly good. Mystic Sanctuary, incredibly good. Uro, incredibly good. You basically get to play a mismatch of some of the best cards in Modern, and that's like just kind of busted. So I think this deck is pretty much close to Tier 0 as you're getting in Modern right now, and I would play, if you are going to play one match at once, not multiple queue, and you have time to learn this deck, this is going to be the best deck, and I think it's going to have cards banned out of it. Usually if you think cards are going to get banned out of a deck, you should probably be playing it. The reason why I'm not playing this deck, one, I don't particularly like these decks. Play-wise, I don't like it. It doesn't fit my playstyle. Two, I haven't had much practice with the deck, and I think I can be beaten in the mirrors pretty efficiently by players who have more practice than me. And 3, I'm playing 3 matches at once, and if I get caught in a mirror or caught in a grindy matchup, I will be screwed playing this deck. So what deck am I going to be playing? I have a couple decisions for people who are going to be playing multiple matches at once, or don't have the reps with Uro control decks, or potentially can't get the cards. Now, my first thought is going to be Eldrazi Tron, new card, Maze Mind Tome. Some people have called it the new Sylvan Library. I don't think it's that good, but I do think the card is pretty good. You scry a couple times or gain some card advantage with drawing, and you gain some life, good against both aggro and control decks. I added a extra Ugin the Ineffable, as I think this card is very good against control. If you can resolve it, it's hard to resolve because of Force Negation, but if you can resolve it, it's very good. I think this has a couple good matchups across the board, Burn and some other, and control is, depending on how they've built their deck, is not that bad. There is the problem of the green-red Ponza deck getting popularity, which this has a pretty bad matchup against, but if you can dodge that, you dodge the bad control variants, and you play against like Sultai, or you play against Burn, or you play against other decks where Chalice of the Void is good, I think you're going to have a great time with this deck. Another deck choice that I think is pretty reasonable right now, Gruul mid-range. You get a Blood Moon people on turn 2. Cloythus is very good in the grindy matchups. You have a lot of card advantage with Seasoned Pyromancer and Bloodbraid Elf. You've got Pillage and Blood Moon to screw them on mana. And you kind of just have a lot of elements that get you either free wins or you can grind out pretty well. Pretty good main deck, and has some reasonable sideboard cards to play against the decks that you are bad against. Now, I am most likely not going to be playing either of these 2 decks. Now, I have a reason. I think they're both fine, but not that great against the blue decks, and have some targets on their backs, as lots of people are playing these decks over the blue decks because people don't necessarily like playing these blue decks right now. What deck I'm going to be playing? Ad Nauseam. I think this deck is quick. I think it has good combo potential and is good against the Gruul deck, which people are picking up a lot. I think it has a reasonable to good matchup against the blue decks because you have Pact Negation, Veil Summer to force through your combo. And you are pretty good against the aggro decks. Now, the problem with this, you're kind of doo-doo diarrhea against Black-Green X, which is not very popular right now, and E-Tron, which is kind of popular. So, as Modern usually is, you got to dodge the matchup lottery. But besides that, I think this is a reasonable choice. And since I'm playing 3 matches at once, I want to reiterate, this is why this is going to be my choice. So, I hope I've helped you get for the first 3 formats, ones that I have a little bit more knowledge in, Modern, Pioneer. Now let's move on to another one where I basically have no idea what I'm talking about, but I've talked to some of the experts in the format, and they've told me that Temur Delver is basically the best deck to be playing right now. I've been told you can play a lot of different decks to be successful, but Temur Delver is the best one right now. You get to play broken cards like Oko, Thief of Crowns, Dreadhorde Arcanist to gain insane amounts of advantage. You have Permission in Daze, Force of Will, Wasteland to deal with some of the decks that you kind of have troubles with at times, and you just kind of play a good Xeroxy, just blue card, very consistent deck, where you kind of just get to play your game plan very consistently. If your opponent doesn't interact with you on every step perfectly, then they are going to lose. So Temur Delver, I think, is my first choice, but once again, I'm not actually going to be playing Temur Delver, most likely. Mostly because I am pretty bad at Legacy right now, and I think Temur Delver really elevates the play skill if you know what to be doing with your cards and how to interact correctly, especially in the blue mirrors. So instead of trying to interact and think and do well when I'm playing 3 matches at once, I'm going to be playing Mono Red Prison. I get to Blood Moon people on turn 1, Trinister people on turn 1, Ensnaring Bridge, Chadra Torch of Defiance, Karn, Chalice of the Void. I want my opponent to not really play Magic, and I don't really want to have to think about playing Magic. I want to just have a freebie deck to play in one of my formats, and this is it. You know, just cut, dry, straightforward, freebie Magic. Sometimes your deck doesn't work out and you lose. That's the way it is. This deck is really based on your opening hand, and sometimes your first couple draws, and if they don't work out, you are going to lose. If that's not your style of play, highly suggest don't playing this deck. But this is the deck that I'm going to be playing, more than likely, because I'm not very versed in the format. So this is my choice. If I were to practice a bit more, I would choose Temur Delver. Now, Vintage is a format that not many people know about. They're not very versed in it. They think it's just a turn 1 format. They think they don't really have a good grasp and idea of it because it's not very played in paper, basically nearly at all. On Magic Online, it's not played all that much, except for by a few solid group of people, and they're going to have an edge on a lot of people. I've actually been getting into Vintage a lot over the past year, and this is a deck that I actually haven't played with yet, but I think has a very good chance of doing well, and it's Grixis Underworld Breach. Though the change that I have made to this deck, I've added white mana to add some heavy hitters in Lavinia, which stop all the Moxins, some free counter spells like Force of Will, Force of Negation, and Monastery Mentor, a restricted card that, if it enters the battlefield, kind of runs away with the game pretty easily, and has been restricted to show that it is one of the best cards you can be playing in the format. Now, if you are new, I would not necessarily play this deck. It is a combo deck that also has lots of interaction. You kind of need to know when to pick your spots, where to go for the combo, when to just play a controlling role, and how to interact correctly. Now, the deck that I would play, if you have not really played much at all, is Dredge. Hope to get lucky, draw your Bazaar of Baghdad, activate it, dredge your whole deck, win the game. Hopefully you can interact with your opponent in the correct ways, or your opponent doesn't interact with you in the correct ways, and you can get lucky with Bazaar and get some free wins. Now, I think Vintage definitely favors having a lot of format knowledge, but it also favors some really busted turn 1 starts because of a lot of unrestricted cards. So, I think just try to play Bazaar of Baghdad and get lucky is a reasonable thing to do, because I also think Bazaar of Baghdad is very powerful right now. So, but I'm going to be playing this deck because I have a lot of practice with blue combo Xeroxy decks like PO, Paradoxical Outcome deck. But of the decks that I would choose this or some Bazaar of Baghdad deck. I hope what I've told you today has been helpful in teaching you what I would play in the format, what I think is good in the formats that I actually knew about, Vintage, Modern, Pioneer, and what decks I think could possibly be good from talking to people who are experts in the other formats of Legacy and Standard. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate everyone who watched, and if this helped anyone, I would appreciate it as well to get some shout-outs. And if you liked the video, make sure to give me a like, subscribe, comment in the description below if you want any more information and stuff. I may post some of the deck lists in the description. I'm not quite sure, because a lot of the deck lists that I show aren't really tuned. They're just kind of ideas to play around, because I do a lot of my tuning on the day before, on the night of, and just figuring out exactly what I want for my last couple slots, and I don't want to give you guys an incomplete deck list. I want you guys to work on the deck list. I'm just giving you the idea of the archetypes and what I think is good currently in the format. But I appreciate it a lot for those of you guys who watched, and those of you who gained something from this. Hopefully you gained a little bit of knowledge, and it'll help you do well in your format challenges, whatever tournaments you're playing this weekend, and maybe get you qualified for the Magic Online Championship Series. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.